So good morning everyone. Today we are going to create a Spring Boot application and develop some features. Okay. So we are on the page start.spring.io. This page will create the boilerplate code. That means the code which we initially need to develop the Spring application. We don't need to write everything from scratch. This will give the basic code that is needed for so that we can start with developing the features rather than working on a configuration and everything from scratch. Okay. So the here you can see the project, and in this project we are going to use Maven dependency. So selected Maven and the language is Java and the group ID. So group ID is it is normally the reverse of the domain of a company which is developing the project. And artifact ID means this is the ID that uniquely identifies the project inside an organization. Okay, it's the name of the project and description of the project. So the default the package we want to have in our folder structure, and here in packaging we use jar and the Java 17 version. Okay. So for developing any web application, Spring Boot based web application, then we need to have one dependency which is mandatory, that is Spring Web. So Spring Web is a mandatory dependency. So for now I think we are okay to go with. So we can click the explore button to see how our pom.xml looks like when we import this project into an IDE. Okay, this is so here we can see that a dependency is added. This is Spring Boot starter web. The Spring Boot, the basically the starter files are the files which are also called dependency descriptors. That means they tell the pom.xml. Internally there are a list of dependencies for which uh, the project these dependencies should be added into the project. So basically the starter dependencies abstracts away the long list of dependencies which needed for the developing the web applications. These starter dependencies come handy when for example here you see the Spring Boot starter web. So this will uh, have dependencies related to the testing of the application. We don't need to write everything that is needed for the testing. We can just add this dependency and it will take care of all the testing related dependencies for us. Okay, so we can click download. Okay, generate, and it will give us a jar file. It's a zip file. We can extract this zip file and we can open it in our IDE. So I opened it on our IDE, extracted the zip file and opened it in the IDE. So here is the project and how it is looks. So we can see that this is the directory structure. There is in Maven projects, one thing we need to remember is it follows a directory structure. So we can configure it, but by default it has a folder structure which is followed. This src/main/java, where all the Java code written by us is placed. You can see demo application.java is the main class. It contains the Spring Boot application annotation. Basically what this annotation does is, you can see let me go inside this application. Okay, you can see that there are many annotations for it. The relevant ones for us for now is this Spring Boot configuration. This Spring Boot configuration class makes us uh, create the beans in using this Spring Boot the demo application class. That is the class which is having this annotation. We can create beans using that class. The second one is auto configuration. So enable auto configuration. So what auto configuration is? So for example, mm, some based on the dependencies in the pom.xml, it will automatically create the beans we require in our project. For example, if we add uh, something like JPA, so the Spring Boot understands that okay, we need a data source object for this project, and it will automatically create create the bean of that object based on the configuration we give in application.properties. Okay, so the another annotation is component scan. So component scan scans all the, for example, scans all the classes in the directory in which the class with which this annotation is annotated with. For example, here it is com.example.demo. So inside this package and its sub packages, it will scan all the classes and create beans for those classes which have the following dependencies. They are like @component, @service, @repository, @controller. So these are stereotype annotations. And then any class with this annotation, it will create the beans for it. Okay, so first of all, so let me create a git repository, or let me see if git repository already initialized in it or not. So let me open the terminal. So here I think it's a git bash. So why it is not opening? No, these are not what we want. So let me reopen it. So for some reason it is not opening. Okay, so let us continue with the developing a user related feature. Okay, so here what we do is we create an application. We create a demo application here. So a feature, user related feature, also where we can add user to the database and retrieve the user from the database. We can do that. Okay, so first of all, let me create a package where we, so first of all we need the user model. Okay, models. Inside this models package, I will create a class called user class. So this user has some properties. For example, private in ID, it will definitely has an ID. So private in string name, the user will have name. and private string email. So the user will also have email. So for example, so let me write getters and setters for this. Let me auto generate it. So it will not take much time. Okay. Okay, we auto generated the getters and setters. Okay. Our model class is ready. Let me save this file. Okay. So next one we need is controller. We create a separate package for controllers. So where is the package? Okay. Dot controllers. So this package will contain the all the controller classes. Class user controller. So what controller do is, so let user controllers. Okay, sorry. Is let me rename this file. User controller. Okay. Okay. So what is controller? What is service? What is repository? So let me tell you that in an application, so code should be divided such that the responsibility of a particular class should be clear. For example, when a request comes to the our system, this should be processed. The request should and response should be processed by some class. Yes, sir. We have to extract the parameters from the URL and request body, and we should after the performing specific task, we need to return the response to the client. So this should be handled by some client, and the actual business logic which uh, which the client needs should be written in some other class. You should not club this whole thing in single class. We can do it and it works, but when the application grows, it will be very cumbersome to handle those files. So for handling request and response, we use the controller class, and for actual business logic, we use service class, and all the code related to the to interacting with the database is written in the DAO class or repository class. So let's now code the user controller. So this is a controller class, and Spring Boot gives us one very handy annotation called controller. What this uh, so we imported it, and this controller, user controller, should work with all the URLs related to the user. So we should map this controller to those URLs. So use the request mapping. So we are mapping particular requests to this controller. So /API/users. So every request with this particular prefix /API/URLs will be redirected to this, that is mapped with this controller class. So let me, okay, for example, let me write a handler method which actually handles the request. Okay, get mapping, get mapping, and here I don't use anything. Okay. Public user, list of users. So let me write a handler method to get all the users in our system. List of user, get all users. So let me for now return null. So list is not imported. Okay. So this, when someone call API dot users with a get mapping, then the list of all the users will be given to the client. So how to fetch all the users in our system? So this is related to the business logic of the system. So okay, let me place this in the correct folders, packages. Okay, everything is right. I didn't see it. Okay, we placed them in the correct packages. So now the actual business logic should go into the service class dot services package services, and inside this service package we have to create the actual service class, user service. This user service class, so like controller annotation, we have service annotation. So there is this working wise, there is no difference between at the rate controller, at the rate service, at the rate repository, but it gives a semantic meaning to every class. Okay, so here we write a function. So for this will be an interface, because we have to provide a contract for the implementation class to implement this user service, so that we can have multiple implementations of this user service. Okay, public, public list of users, user, get all users. So the every class that extends this service annotation, this user service interface, that implements it, we should have this all users. Okay, get user by id, get user by id, and we should accept the id here. So public user, add user, int user. So we have to write an implementation class also for this. Okay, user service implementation. This is the class that implements user service. So this class should have the service annotation rather than the actual rather than this interface. Okay. Okay, so here it is showing the red line because we are not implementing the methods that are provided by this interface. Okay, so let us implement it. Add all unimplemented methods. Okay. Okay, so get all users. Okay, so now we have the implementation class. So how do we, so for getting all the classes, from where should we get our classes? In a real project we get all the classes from the database, but in for the sake of this project we are going to store them in the repository. So let me create a class package with repositories, and inside this I will create a class called user repository. User repository, this is the @repository, and for storing the object based on the id, the best thing is, I think, the using the map data structure. Map of long comma user. Okay, user long comma user. So let me get all the import all the required classes. Okay, okay, it's ready now, and we write the, so this should be private, I think, private. So let user get all users, list of users. Then what we should do is, so I imported all the required classes. So we should return all the users of the of this class. So okay, let me create a list of users users is equal to new array list, and we get all the values. That means here you can see that key is the id and the value is the user. So we get all the users and iterate over those users and add them to our list. Okay, for user in map dot get dot values, users dot add user, and return this list of users. So okay, let me see here the let me see here inside the service class we should have in the service implementation, we should have this repository as an so we should have this repository as a dependency, because we for here for getting all the users we should have a repository object, right? So we should have the repository object is needed in this class, so we user repository so we auto-wire this using constructor injection. For example, public user service implementation of user repository and this dot user repository is equal to user repository. So we are auto-wiring this user repository class to this user repository of the class using the constructor injection. So here what we should do is user repository dot get all users. So this will return all the users for us. So inside this controller here, so this controller should have the user service implementation because it needs the business logic to run. So otherwise it can't return any response to the client. So we should have the user service and we auto wire it using the constructor injection. Controller user service. Okay, we auto wired this user service class. Okay, from this get all users, let me return user service dot get all users. This will, for example, let us understand the flow. When a client calls the slash users slash API slash users, the call, if it is a get method, then the call is handled by the URL is handled by this method. Okay, what this method do is it calls the get all users method of the user service, that means this class, and here what it does is this get all users class will call the user repository because eventually the data is stored in the user repository, right? So it will store it in the user repository and get all users. So it will return it and the user controller will return this one to the client. So we should create also on post mapping, so we can add it in the request. Okay, so public user create user, and this method should take the user object from the client and it should return the newly created user. So for now, and it should need some business logic to create a user. So here we have an add user in the service interface, so we should implement that. Okay, for adding the for adding it to the database, what we should do is the repository should have a counter, I think. Counter is equal to, let me initialize with 0. So every time he adds a new user, it should increment by itself. So we are basically simulating the sequence generator of the database. Okay, user, add user, and it will take the object of type user in it. It will return the newly created object. We know how to create a user. So map.put counter comma user, counter plus plus. And it should also, before putting it in the map, it should assign the id to the user class. Set id counter. Okay, it should return the, so why it is not int. Okay, so here I think we should use long. So okay, this is all right, and here it is okay now. We should return the new user. Okay, so here in add users we call the user repository dot add user, and it will add the user and return the newly created user object. So in the service controller class, the controller class, what we see is, where is the controller? Okay, controller class, it will use the user service to create the object. Add user. Okay, so the post method. So let me summarize what we did in this example. So first of all, we created a user model which represents the data of a model. So if we are using some ORM tool, it will be entity. Okay, so first of all, we created the classes related to the controller, service, and repository. The controller handles the request and response. The service will have the business logic, and the repository will interact with the database for any data access object. Okay, we added the respective classes for it. Okay, so I think you should save the files. For some reason I haven't switched on the autosave. So everything is okay, and let us see if we can run it, if it runs or not. So we can see that the application is successfully started. You can see the started demo application in 2.7 seconds. Okay. Let me test it. So the interesting part is we can test this. We can test this using the Postman tool. So you can here see that Tomcat started on port 8080. So let us take this. So for some reason the recording is stopped and I am resuming the recording. So we are debugging the system, right? We are calling this because I don't know where the error is coming. So let me see if this method, the user controller method, get all users, is working or not. So let me rerun this application and see whether it is working or not. So let me now send the request. We can see that this method is being called, and where does the error coming from? There is no, it is not a single error is being generated. So let me put the breakpoint here. So let me run it in the debug mode. Okay. So it is started in the debug mode, and I'm going to send the request. Okay, here let us see what went wrong. So here this is the object, and we are going to step over. So here we will step into this, and so okay, let me see this list of users. You can see this here. We can see the list of users, this array list you can see here, and we step over it again. It added all the users to it. So currently it is empty, right? Then return the users. So get all users returned here. It returned nothing, right? So let us see what it returned. This has a user service has a user repository, it has a map. This map has nothing in it. Okay, I think we should try to add a user first, and then we can perform any calculations. So we give a post request, and we give some JSON. We will use JSON for now. Name is Srikanth, and the email is srikanth@example.com. Okay, so I think there is something that is missing here. Here we have to annotate this user with something. So I think it is request body or something. @request body. Okay, request body. I should rerun it now, I think. Okay, so let me try to send this request. So why is it not taking my request? What's happening? It is not saying, it is not found. Is it localhost or so let me run it here. Localhost 080/API/users. So it is running, right? Why it is not giving any response here? So let me debug this. In repository we should, I think, when adding the user, we should user.getName plus user.get email. So let us see by printing this whether it is working or not. So when we call this service, whether it is working or not, let us see that. So send a request. Okay, here you can see Srikanth and Srikanth at @gmail example.com. It is working, right? Why it is not giving any response? So let me see where the things gone wrong. Yeah, okay. The main reason is we should use REST controller here. We are not creating an MVC application, so we should have the REST controller here, and I think this should work fine right now. Okay, so how did I miss this basic point? The REST controller is basically returns the, so this controller, these handler methods, right? These are all the handler methods, and the return value of the handler method will be sent to the client if we use REST controller. So previously we are using the controller class, which will search for a view in the resources. That is the reason why, I think that is the reason why we are not getting the response. Now I think we should get the response. Yes, you can see that we got the response, and if we get request on it, I think so. No, so we can see that I think we should get the request response, right? The post worked fine. The get method should give us the results, right? Is there any debug pointer? Okay, here we have debugging enabled, so I think that is the reason. Step over. Okay, let me click all the way up to, or is there anything resume? So I think what went wrong. So let me rerun this without the breakpoint. I think that is the reason that it stopped now. So let me rerun it. So let us call the users, and it is returning an empty array because currently there is no users in our system. And let me add a user to it. Okay, you can see the user is added to the database with ID 0. That is, we auto generated this ID. We simulated the sequence manager of the database. And now if we make a get request, you should get this one. So let me add another user to it. So 1 2 3. So let me send the request. We got the response with a different ID. So we are simulating the database, auto increment of the database. And here we got the details, and when we post request to it, we get the, we should get two users. So we are getting two users, you can see, right? So this is for now, this is for today, guys. Thank you very much. I think the battery is also running out. Okay, let me stop the recording. Thank you very much.